The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Welcome to the bonus show. As we get closer to the first votes being cast in the Democratic primary, we are going to start looking more and more closely on the broadcast show at particular states. And one of the states that's important, not so much in terms of the delegates that it provides, but in terms of the sort of momentum and public relations effect that it can have, is Iowa. And in Iowa, Pete Buttigieg is now leading. According to a recent poll, he has now gotten up to 22% in the latest Iowa poll, whereas Biden is down to 19%, Warren in third place at 18%, and Bernie at 13%. Now, there's a couple of things to keep in mind here. One is there are questions about, these are pretty big swings. This is Buttigieg plus 14. And this is Biden down 7. Do we believe that there really is this much of a swing, or may some of these be margin of error artifacts? We don't know, and we really won't know. And these caucuses, Pat, anyway, are notoriously hard to predict. It's a different format. It requires a different process than just going and voting in a primary. And we will see. But there's no question that even though Pete Buttigieg is still, I think it's like 5th place overall, if he were able to win the first primary, the PR benefit would be massive. And I don't know that it gets him the nomination, but it certainly gives him more staying power than what he was looking like he had a month ago.
Yeah, of course, you can't take too much stock into one poll, but assuming that this is accurate, that does tell us something. I mean, I kind of wrote off Pete Buttigieg because if you're, at 7-8% in the polls, can you really expect to win the entire nomination? Not really. I've only been looking at the top 3. That's Biden, Warren, and Bernie as actual contenders. But if he's able to win Iowa, if he could pull that off, then for a week after the Iowa caucuses, everyone in the media is talking about Pete Buttigieg, and maybe other people in other states will view him as a viable option. He'll already have that delegate lead and maybe be able to continue on that trend going forward. So that may actually make him a real contender if he does win Iowa.
No question about it. And the truth is that even nationally, he has surged from, I think it was around 4.5-ish% up to 8% nationally. That is a change. And certainly it represents momentum. Now, to be thorough, there's another poll from 5 days ago in Iowa, which says that Pete Buttigieg is not in first place. And in the end, all of these, we've got 2 3-point margins. They're all within the margin of error. We just don't know. But I think we can't question that Buttigieg has momentum. The other question that comes up is, when Bernie does well in New Hampshire, we say, okay, Vermont is next to New Hampshire. I don't know how much it tells us. Buttigieg, as mayor of South Bend, Indiana, is near enough to Iowa that there might be some contagion or Midwest effect or something like that. I don't want to diminish the importance of this, but you also, when there are regional or geographic explanations, it's also something that we just want to consider.
Yeah, where things stand now, Buttigieg does have a good shot at winning Iowa, but he doesn't have a good shot at winning New Hampshire. He's way down in the polls there. Certainly not going to win South Carolina. I think he still has around 0 or 1% of the African American vote, which is not good. You can't win a Democratic primary if you don't get those numbers up. And it also makes me question, should Iowa be the first state that gets to vote? Because it's not like it's the most representative state in the entire country. It doesn't have the right demographic makeup that we see from the entire country at large. Maybe having a different state that's more diverse, in both racial makeup and also different jobs and in different sectors that are represented in the economy, maybe that would be better. We made it Minnesota or Massachusetts that gets the vote first.
Well, listen, that's a huge debate, and obviously states have an incentive to get, it brings attention to you if you are the first to vote because you are considered a bellwether, even if, you're pointing out, there can be geographical reasons, demographic reasons, economic reasons, all sorts of things why the results might be one way in the state that happens to vote first. Now, with Iowa has been the first since 1972. And it's, there's no question that people do wonder, why is it that it remains that way, particularly given that it's whiter and more rural than most of the rest of the country. Part of it is because it is a caucus, and part of that, I think that there is something about, I'm going from memory here, but because it's a caucus, and if you don't get 15%, it's not just that you don't get delegates. If your candidate doesn't get 15%, then you have to go to a different table and the support shifts until it coalesces. That's a different process altogether. And there may be something about, because that's the case, it may not be subject to the same schedule restrictions as other states, or so there's something like that that springs to mind, which we'd have to research, Pat. So the point is, there's a reason why Iowa is first. It doesn't make sense if you're trying to match it up to the predominant demographics of the party or the country, or rural versus city divide. It doesn't make any sense as far as that goes. But there is a reason, and I don't know that it's necessarily going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, it's quirky, but it's the tradition that we have. I'd like to see it change. I like how California moved their primary date up earlier in the cycle, so that they're now one of the first few states to vote, which makes sense because they're such a big state. But yeah, I mean, it always is kind of strange how we do the scheduling. I don't think we should do all the primaries and caucuses on one day. I think there should be sort of like a season where it takes place and you go one state to the next, but like maybe changing it up every election cycle, I think that would be good at least.
One argument is that it should be randomized so that you could just say, instead of some days where there's one primary and some days where there's 20 or 14 or whatever the case may be, the way to simplify it would be you say, okay, 50 states and the territories, whatever the number is, we divide it up evenly. So any primary day has, say, 4 elections. And then you just pick a bunch of Tuesdays on the calendar and you say, all right, we're dividing up the states into 8 different election days. Each one has whatever the number is that needs to be so that it works out, 5, 6, whatever. And they are going to rotate in some way. The thing about this is the rotations are only every 4 years. So it's like 100 years before it repeats. I mean, it's just like the process is so infrequent that it seems that things change so drastically that putting in place something like that, it could be a century before you go through a variety of combinations,
Yeah, and it's just like abolishing the Electoral College. There's a lot of talk about it during the election cycle, certainly after the popular vote is undermined, like after Hillary Clinton won the popular vote but lost the Electoral College. People were talking about how we have to abolish this thing. But then a few more months go by after the election and no one pays attention to it anymore. It's the type of thing that people only focus on once every 4 years, and that's not the way to make changes with this sort of thing. It kind of keeps the system that we have currently going on into the future.
Yeah, and as we've seen, focusing on voter suppression only in the 6 months or even year leading up to an election, as many people do, and certainly as media only does, has not been particularly effective at curbing it. There is a cost to becoming a U.S. citizen, and that cost could go up 61% thanks to a new proposal from the Trump administration. And they claim that the cost needs to go up to reflect the true cost. However, this increase is far more than what could be even reasonably defended by inflation. The Department of Homeland Security wants to increase the application fee to $1,170. Now, listen, I think that if you don't even have to be a cynic to immediately identify what this is about. Trump has made it very clear. He likes the idea of immigrants from Norway. He doesn't like the idea of immigrants from so-called shithole countries. What is a great way, and that is a very not only racialized, but also classist thing to say. On average, people coming to the U.S. from Norway have more money than people coming from Haiti, for example. So what is a very easy way to, without changing any policy about who do we prioritize or whatever, to reduce the number of people from the countries that you've deemed undesirable who come and become citizens? You just make it more expensive, which is going to create a barrier to entry that will disproportionately affect poor people who happen to be the people that Donald Trump wants to dissuade from coming to the U.S. or from becoming citizens. So you don't have to be a crazy conspiracy theorist or cynic to immediately identify that, Pat, as likely the impetus here. The defense from the Trump administration is the actual cost has gone up to process this. And the counterpoint is, well, it can't have gone up so much more than inflation, can it?
Yeah, and they want to make the application fee $1,170. That's a lot of money. I mean, that's like 2% of the median household income in the United States. And of course, I would imagine that native born citizens make more money than immigrants. So, I mean, that's just a guess, but I would imagine that would be like a bigger cost burden to people coming into the country than people who are already here. And yeah, I mean, I guess the counter argument is that processing these applications do take resources and you have to like spend money on that. So there should be some sort of application fee, but I'm totally fine with that being subsidized by people who live here in this country because we know the long-term benefits of immigration and it does help the economy. We know that immigrants tend to commit fewer crimes than native-born citizens. So I think it does make sense to try to keep that application fee low. And even if it costs more to process the fee than what the immigrants are putting up, I think that makes all the sense in the world to try to
not to
subsidize
mention
it.
that you can be in favor of a fee, and I think most people understand government processes sometimes have fees. You pay a fee when you register a car, you pay a fee, all these different things. You could even agree that the fee should be indexed to inflation, but this degree of a fee increase is what people are having a problem with, particularly when it comes from the Trump administration. I think if you had an administration that was otherwise, dealing with DACA, being sensible at the border, being sensible when it comes to the, child separations and detentions and the conditions, if all of that was fine and someone came and said, hey, you know what? We've calculated the cost and it's really costing 61% more. We would still want them to defend that claim, but we might be less immediately cynical about their motivations for doing it. Here, it's been a disaster all along. And then Trump says, by the way, fees are going to go up 60%. It's not squaring with anything.
Yeah, and do you think that the veil has been lifted, like the joke's over? Like Republicans used to claim that they were all for legal immigration, but just opposed to illegal immigration, and that's how they would try to frame the argument.
Oh yeah, that's
with
been
stuff
just
like
done away
this.
with.
I mean, it's just pretty clear that they're just against immigration in total. They want to make it hard for people, especially if you're low income, to get into this country.
Of course,
the only people that they want coming over is maybe if you're like rich already, and like you're not the person who stands to benefit the most from coming here anyway. In that case,
yeah, the facade has absolutely been demolished. That the Democrats are the ones for, first of all, the idea that Democrats are for open borders, I think has been demolished, although the Republicans are still insisting on that. And the facade that Republicans aren't against immigration, they're only against illegal immigration, has also been demolished. They're against all immigration, legal and illegal, other than from the specific populations that they've determined are coming from non-shithole countries and are the right types of people. The facade has been destroyed, and if you're not paying attention or you're willfully ignorant, then maybe you haven't realized it. So yesterday, there was a very controversial circumstance that took place with the desired impeachment of a president. But I'm not talking about the hearings related to Donald Trump's impeachment. I'm talking about the president of the Student Senate at a school in Florida, at the University of Florida, named Michael Murphy. Michael Murphy is accused of using mandatory fees collected by the school from students to pay 50 grand for Don Jr. and his girlfriend Kimberly Guilfoyle to speak at the school in October. And the impeachment resolution of the Student Senate president has now been obtained and made public by the Tampa Bay Times. And it says that this is not a political disagreement necessarily with what Michael Murphy did, that Michael Murphy violated a student body statute which says you cannot use activity fees or service fees for an event that supports or opposes a political party or politician. And the idea that $50,000 of mandatory fees was used to enrich Don Jr. and Kimberly Guilfoyle and provide a platform for them to promote Donald Trump violates that. This is crazy in the sense that, the audacity of someone in a position like this. When I was at UMass, I had friends in student government. I don't even know that they would have necessarily had the wherewithal or resources to even pull something like this off, but it would have been inconceivable, quite frankly.
Yeah, I mean, whether or not the student body president resigns or keeps his job, I'm not honestly that interested in that. But like the Don Jr. angle, I think is pretty interesting. And if this was like a Republican club or a Libertarian club at the University of Florida and they wanted to offer Don Jr. a bunch of money to go speak, there would be no problem there because that's totally opt-in. I suppose one could argue that's opt-in to go into the University of Florida to begin with, but oftentimes students are getting scholarships and sometimes those activity fees are paid for with taxpayer dollars. So is it all that fair that ends up going to Don Jr. in his pockets? I would say no. So yeah, I think like it's one thing for the student body president. He did wrong certainly by like offering Don Jr. this money and carrying out that transaction, but it's also wrong for Don Jr. I think to accept the money and to go speak there. You should know better too.
Maybe so, although I don't know. Like I've spoken at colleges before where they pay, and I genuinely don't know if I'm being paid out of discretionary department funding. I don't know if I'm being paid out of student fees. I wouldn't necessarily know the rules at any particular school. I actually am unsure, even though I'm all about personal responsibility, I don't know how much we can blame Don Jr. for this, particularly when he's getting invited to all sorts of stuff all the time. I don't know about that.
Yeah, and like I know that you speak at college campuses sometimes too, but like, do you think maybe the dollar and cent number is what is the difference maker here? Like, I'd imagine I don't know how much you're getting paid for those
I don't get
appearances,
50
but it's
grand,
not
that's for sure.
$50,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like maybe that's where the difference comes in.
Not to
And
mention,
it's
I don't
funny
get
how,
to have my girlfriend up on the stage with me.
yeah, that's true too. Well, she's not a former Fox News host, so maybe
No,
that's why.
that's
But
true.
I think it's funny how Don Jr. is going around the country right now talking about Hunter Biden and the corruption of the Bidens, and
Yep.
how he wishes that Don Jr. wishes that he could make money off of his dad's presidency like Hunter Biden was able to do with his dad's position. Like he delivers that line with no sense of irony at all. He's profiting handsomely off of this.
One of the defenses to this from the student Senate president is that he also tried to bring Bernie Sanders to the school. And that does appear to be true, but I just don't know how that plays into this. If either way, you can't use the money from these fees, which, by the way, are already completely absurd and exploded. And these are the fees that lead to people having student loans, which then they have to work 30 years to pay off or whatever. Either way, it would still be inappropriate to use the fees for political events, is my understanding of it.
Yeah, and I mean, like, it just seems like such a waste of money. Like, Don Jr. is not worth that much. He's not this big get that everyone thinks he is. Like, oh yeah, we got Don Jr.
Maybe
Well,
in
he's gotta
the
come speak
University
at
of
the
Florida,
university.
he's considered a big get. I mean, I don't know. It's a more conservative part of the country.
I mean, if we locked in an interview with Donald Trump Jr., I wouldn't even be all that excited. Like, we would do it, I'm sure, and it would probably be good content. But like, it wouldn't be like our biggest get of the year. I don't even think.
Listen, it wouldn't be, wow, I can't wait to speak to this great thinker. No, it wouldn't be that. But certainly it would be a very prominent get for us. And I think it would be good for the show. But I understand what you're saying. It's not where the value of the content he brings, insults about Hunter Biden, are so insightful, and unique that it would excite us very much. So we'll see if the University of Florida can weather this incredible controversy. We will see whether impeachment takes hold. I don't know what the process is there, whether he will be informed of due process and whether he gets to have representation, whether there is a trial and conviction. I have no clue what the process for impeachment is there, but this guy got himself into some hot water. Now, by the way, Republicans saying this guy's got success written all over him. The fact that he even figured out a way to use these fees to bring Don Jr. This is the guy that should immediately be hired to run a campaign. And indeed, he probably has a pretty bright future in the Republican Party.
Yeah, I mean, he's already pledged his loyalty to Trump, right? And he's willing to pull off corruption in their name. So maybe he's probably about to graduate college soon if he's student body president. He probably has a job in the Trump administration for the next year, and maybe even more if Trump gets reelected.
He's actually going to be the finance manager for what's it called? Turning Point USA. He'll be traveling around with Blarley Cork and Candace Blowens.
And Don Jr. will be there too, yelling at people in the audience.
Yes, and getting yelled at, by the way. That's a whole, by the way, should we just do like 30 seconds about that? So
Sure.
Earlier this week, I talked on the broadcast show about how Don Jr. was booed off stage because he was refusing to answer questions at a TPUSA event. That's the Charlie Kirk Turning Point USA thing. The story is so much more complex than I even want to get into because apparently there's a group called Groypers, and they are, I guess, like more extreme white nationalist right-winger types who are at odds with Don Jr. It's just this huge mess, and I think that where I come away with it is I don't even care so much about the details, Pat, but I'm just glad that there's infighting on the right.
Yeah, it's entertaining to step back and look at that Republican infighting. I think that's all this is. It's also funny to watch Charlie Kirk just like completely lose control of his organization and to see people turn on him. And it's surprising in a way because like didn't Turning Point USA get in trouble for like many of their chapters being run by white supremacists and people who had said very racist and controversial things online?
At least
so
a
like
couple
the
of
fact
chapters,
that they're trying to like do away with that. And that it's not working, that people are like taking over those events that are alt-righters and white nationalists that they don't want there. I think that's pretty funny.
They're having all sorts of problems. And by the way, I haven't even seen Candace Owens at any of the events for a while. I think maybe she's living in London now because she's married a British dude or something.
I don't know if they're together anymore. I think they may have cut ties, and Candace Owens is now with PragerU and Dennis Prager. I don't know if that's like one of those like things where you have to choose one or the other, but I'm pretty sure that Candace Owens isn't working for Turning Points USA anymore.
Got it. Okay. Well, there it is. I think we're now up to speed on the bottom-feeding college campus Republican talking point industrial complex, which is very well funded, by the way. That does it for today. New show and new bonus show tomorrow. Don't miss it.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.